Good morning, class. This week I want to talk to you about the law of increasing and decreasing returns and the principle of deliberate practice. I think that this could have a big impact as you really try to improve your writing or other areas of your life. And I wanted you to know that I'm a real person. So let me show you how these laws work. The law of decreasing returns says that the longer you do something, the lower the return is. So on our axis here we have time over here. So this one says the reward is going down over time. Let's give us some examples that would make sense. Let's say you're trying to be good and exercise and eat right. But eating is one of those things that if you've been waiting for a long time, when you start eating, it feels really good at first. But if you just kept eating over time, it's going to feel worse. Like you're just going to drop down here and it's going to be like, oh, I feel terrible after doing the same thing with like any sort of a vice or addictive behavior. This is drugs and alcohol, pornography, things like that work. It feels really good at first, but the longer you do it, you're going to end up crashing as you come down here, the longer you do it. It's also why roller coasters are only, a few minutes instead of an hour long. It would not feel, you wouldn't be very excited to be on a roller coaster for an hour at a time, right? So there's just certain things in life that the shorter the time, the better the reward is. But if you do it over a long period of time, the worse it gets. The other side of the spectrum says the longer you do something, the better the return is. So for example, on this, these would be things like any kind of sport. So if you've learned a sport or music, if you've learned a musical instrument or something like that, that you know that it's hard when you first start. Like you've got this zone here where it's just practice. And you've just got to practice over and over and over again. And it's not very fun when you're practicing, but if you do it long enough, you pass this point where instead of forcing yourself down here, you're sort of forcing yourself to practice. But as you cross this point, it becomes rewarding, and so that you naturally want to practice. So for example, try some things like learning the musical instrument, or in the gospel. When you're first learning the gospel, sometimes you might have to remind yourself, hey, every morning I've got to pray, read my scriptures, and you just got to practice these things, and then it becomes a habit. And as the habit increases, you get more out of it. Now, here's how Satan uses these two laws in his favor. Let's say you're down here, and let's say it's, whatever what you're working at. Could be diet and exercise, could be breaking an addiction, could be just trying to get better at the gospel or something, right? So you're down here in this zone right here, and you're practicing, and it's not very much fun. It's hard work, and you just gotta force yourself to do this over and over again. And Satan comes to you while you're in this zone, and he's like, man, wouldn't you feel better if you were back over here? And you're like, wow, I really would feel better right now if I just had, that bowl of ice cream, or binged watched my Netflix episodes, or went back to my vice, whatever it might be, pornography or whatever it is, right? And you get back to that point and it feels good at first while you're doing it, but then afterwards you just crash and you start feeling bummed out again, and you're just depressed that you did this again, and that you've wasted your time, and that you haven't been improving your life. And then you think, man, I just can't live like this anymore. And so then you start saying, okay, I'm going to get back to practice, and I'm going to start practicing again. And then Satan comes back to you when it gets hard, and then he says, man, wouldn't you feel better again back over here? And this is how Satan wears us out. It's so exhausting to be in this loop that he keeps us in. And eventually he'll get us to give up. If we stay in that loop long enough, we'll just start to believe that we can't really improve, or that Christ really wouldn't be there for us, or that God wouldn't want to forgive us of our sins that we do over and over again. He just makes us feel depressed and wears us out. The reason he does this is not just because he's a jerk. I mean, he is, but also because he understands what's going on over here. If you keep practicing and you keep moving up the line over here, you're becoming more capable. You're becoming more able to engage in your home and in your family, in your community, in your life, and your job. You're becoming more capable. But to get through that point, it's hard work. I mean, this is work to get up that this side of the spectrum. Now, let's say way up here at the top of this thing is the professional, right? So if you're a professional, you've really got to the top of that spectrum. Now, we can't be a professional in everything. So along the way, we decide what are things that we'd like to be good at and what would we like to be more capable in doing. And so we make choices on things that we're going to practice. Now, in this course, you might decide that writing... Okay, sorry about that. Had to take a break. My daughter fell off her chair while eating her bagel this morning. It's quite tragic. So where were we? Writing. You might choose that writing is something that you want to get better at. Now, here's how deliberate practice works. There's probably been some things in your life that you do over and over again, but you're not getting any better. Let's say you've actually been reading your scriptures and saying your prayers for a long time, but you're no closer to being a scriptorian than you were 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And that might be because you're not engaging in what's called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice isn't that you identify what it is that I need to do in order to move up this line over here. And to do that, you make a list of the things that you'd have to improve, and then you rank them. So I'm going to give you an example. I like to play squash, but I'm not very good. I'm probably someplace right about here in my squash, game. I enjoy it. It's something that's fun, but I'm not a professional, and I probably will never become a professional. But if I wanted to get better, I know what I need to do. The first thing I would do is that I would work on my grip. I would just practice over and over again, holding the racket the right way, making sure I had an open face, making sure that I followed through on my stroke, and I would just do that over and over again until it became a habit that I didn't have to think about. Then the next thing I'd do is I'd always go back to the tee. The tee is the center part of the court, and I just practice every time you hit the ball, go back to the tee, go back to the tee. And I would just keep doing that over and over again until that became a habit. And so as I went down my list, I'd be checking off the most important thing for me to do that would make the biggest difference in becoming better at this thing. And then I just keep working down that list until I got better. So let's apply this to our class. It's possible that you could go through this entire course and be marginally better at writing for a time, but then after the course ends, you could just forget, and go back to your old ways and your habits, unless you engage in deliberate practice. So during this course, we are teaching you specific things that will help you get better in your writing. So for example, you might find, let's get a new list up here that's maybe for our writing. We've taught you about fragments and run-on sentences and descriptions. And it just keeps going on, right? All the skills. You're going to learn all these skills all down through the course. Now, to get better, what you need to do is you need to identify what aspect of my writing needs the most work. Let's say if it was fragments was my number one, in order to check this off, I would have to keep asking myself over and over again, does this pass the random stranger question? If I went up to a random person and I asked this question, would it make sense to them? And you would just keep practicing that. Every sentence you would write, you'd ask that question. And you just keep doing it until it became a habit, until fragments was no longer a problem for you. And then you could move on to run-ons or some grammar or descriptions, and you would just keep working through it. Now, as you work through it, it's going to move you up the scale here every time to a little bit higher spot. And it allows you to be able to make deliberate practice in becoming better. Now, here's another reason why I think it's important for you to engage in deliberate practice, and why Satan uses this trap, this loop over here that he's always using. This is why he does it. Over here on this side of the spectrum, almost always you are thinking about yourself. What would feel good to me right now? What would I like to do? I would like a bowl of ice cream. I would like to go back to my vice. I would like to just, eat this or binge watch or whatever it is, right? It's always about me. And he keeps you on this focused on yourself zone. But over here, as you become more capable, as you develop talents, you actually are looking outward. How can I serve and bless others with this talent? How can I take my writing to be able to communicate more effectively in my home and in my family and in my job? How could I take my skill in music or in being able to teach and empathize with others and turn that into something that blesses others? So the Lord needs us to become more capable as we move up and have more talents and develop our talents and become better at things, because it helps us not only to resist Satan's trap over here, don't do that anymore, but it helps us to be able to help others along the way. So this week, I want you to focus on what things do I need to deliberately practice in my writing to get better. Identify those. I'm going to give you some feedback on what I think you need to be working on, and through this course, figure out. I will keep working on fragments. I will keep working on better descriptions or word choice or vocabulary so that I can get better at this and have this become a skill or a talent that I can use to bless my life and the lives of others. All right. That's enough for this morning. I'll talk with you later.